Hi, and thanks again for joining us for the next installment of Bridging the Gap. My name is Jared Jones, Director of Investments and Associate Financial Advisor at Omega. Today, I'm joined by Lisa Kirchenbauer, the founder and president of Omega here in Arlington, Virginia. How are you doing, Lisa?
I'm doing well. We're getting close to summer here and things are starting to lighten up a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to it. So as the title indicates, we've launched our show and we've been doing it now for the past 7 weeks to try and bring people a different perspective on money, markets, and life, whether it's through the lens of gender, generation, or political orientation. We hope to inform, educate, and entertain you. On today's episode, we're going to talk about 3 different topics. The first is doom scrolling, which sounds like a tough name, but it's basically just looking at how people are affected by all the stuff going on in today's world, looking at it on your phone constantly, and some of the other tech involved that's really designed to keep you focused on that. The next topic we're going to talk about is what do you do right now if you're sitting on a lot of cash, whether that's because you sold out of the markets earlier in the year, or you have cash coming to you through a windfall. Maybe it's an inheritance, maybe it's some, like for some of our clients, some stock options coming due. What are you going to do with that cash? Not really being sure where the market is headed from here. And the last topic we're going to talk about is it looks like banks have tightened up their lending in certain areas, primarily on your house, getting into the equity that you've built up in your house, whether that's HELOC or other ways. They've kind of clamped down on that. So we want to talk about that and explore what's going on there. In the future, we've been doing this for a while now. We'll continue to do it. We're going to provide weekly updates and ideas for you to think about and hopefully connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and our YouTube channel. You can go ahead and give this video a like. I know that helps the algorithms. We're going to talk about some tech, but giving us a like will help the algorithms. So please feel free to do that. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So the first topic we have today is doom scrolling, and there's an article earlier last week from Wall Street Journal's lead tech correspondent Nicole Wynn, just on what are some of the things going on. Obviously, there's a lot of turmoil going on in the country, whether it's through coronavirus or through the riots and the protesting going on. So we've been kind of hooked on to looking at our phones and watching the news. And both really the phone and the news are kind of built for you to pull on your strings as humans, your flight or fight response. You're going to see something that outrages you. You're going to be more likely to keep scrolling. It's really tough. I've tried to limit it, but you just get sucked in at some points during the day and you can't really help it. So I don't know if you have any experience with maybe a little too much news going on right now or anything like that, Lisa.
Yeah, it's such a temptation, and I think the phone is probably the worst culprit of it, as opposed to, when you're, on your laptop or you're on your PC or whatever. I try not to start to dive into the articles, but it's hard not to. And I think the thing that we really need to encourage our listeners to pay attention to, this is an election year. As much as there's all this other stuff that's been going on, this is an election year. As much as the social media platforms are trying to manage the hateful posts, the untrue posts, they can't catch it all, right? And some of it is true and it's terrible. And so I think this is something that we're all going to need to pay even more attention to the closer we get to the election, because what we also know from a political standpoint is negative ads help. As terrible as that is to say about politics, we know that negative ads tend to help a candidate, and there's going to be a lot of that. So if you're already feeling it right now, I think you got to strap in and be prepared for it to get worse. So I wonder, what do you try to do, Jared, to not get sucked into that negative rabbit hole?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm by no means am I perfect, but like in an ideal world, what I try to do is like when I wake up in the morning, maybe after I've had a cup of coffee, I'll try and look at the news then. and then just trying to avoid it as best I can until the end of the day. Because anything that's going on while I'm at work, right?
Right.
Put that in quotes. It's not going to really affect the way I live or do at work. So I just try and focus on what's going on during the day, and then at night I'll try and maybe catch like the local news a little bit and the national news. And trying to avoid scrolling as best I can. But it's tough because these apps, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they've all become so much a part of our life. So, when you have a down moment, you might find yourself scrolling, and who knows what you're going to find, and who knows. I'm certainly apt to go down rabbit holes if I have a little bit of time. So who knows where I'll end up. But, I think the main thing I try to do is limit it. And I know there's other techniques that people can use, whether that's putting like a time limit. A lot of phones today have built that in, because I think the companies realize that the tech companies are realizing that this can be a problem for some people. So they're trying to build features now that will help those that want help, I guess. That's the first step. You have to want to help yourself, right? Put your own breathing mask on, your own life vest. So
You do. Well, and I know you've said like Sunday nights, you have gotten away from, for this reason, checking the futures market on Sunday night for the U.S. stock markets on Mondays. I have a different opinion about that, but I'm curious as far as why you stopped doing that and what that was doing for you.
I still do it. So I think one of the other pieces of advice people have is to turn off the push notifications on your phone. So like those alerts that just pop up without you doing anything, breaking news, X, Y, and Z is happening. They advise you to turn that off. The only one that I have on right now is CNBC, because that's kind of related to my job, right? Like it's helpful to know if the stock market is crashing during the middle of the day, just in case, we need to get something out to clients or talk with them. But I have that on. This past Sunday night, Dow futures, I get a ding, CNBC update. I'm trying to relax, just my last bit of peace and quiet before hitting the week. Dow futures were down 600 points. And I'm like, oh, great. Maybe this is the turning point of the markets and we're heading back to where we were in March. So then the wheels start going, and it's just like, that's not what I want to do with my Sunday night.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I get that. And at the same time, for me, I tend to be very future looking. And so I want to know so that, and then I'll check it again in the morning to see, because what we do know about the futures market is that is not necessarily what's going to happen for the week. So,
Right.
you need to not get overly attached to whatever you see prior to the market's opening, just in case, though, if if it really looks bad. And to me, bad is closer to about down 1,000 points on the Dow at this point. Then I'm certainly going to be paying attention in the morning and certainly be ready for, maybe some questions or just to get on top of it, as you said. So, yeah, I mean, that's one piece. I think what we're really talking about here with the doom scrolling is just one after another of negative news. And, again, not only for elections and ads, but we know for news, negative news sells more than positive news.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the writer of the article talks about is the positive news. The algorithms don't pay much attention to it. People don't interact as much with positive news as they do negative news on these social media apps. So the negative news gets pushed way to the top of wherever you look. So that's usually the first thing you'll see is something negative, which is unfortunate.
Yep, absolutely.
I know I like NBC nightly news, and they at least try to put like the last 1 minute of the show some positive news.
Yeah, I love that they do that, and also some good news. That's a great series that's been put out there. I've enjoyed a little bit of that as well online. So, what we also know, because we've been talking about the markets, right, is that we have had quite a roller coaster ride. And so we took a really big hit in March, and we've had a big recovery since then. Double-digit returns on a lot of clients' returns since the
big returns too, right?
Yeah. And so it's been quite a roller coaster ride. And yet there are people who either ahead of COVID and ahead of the March move downwards or during it may have sold out of part of their portfolio, or as you said, may be coming into some cash. And this can seem like a really unsure time to be putting money into the market. So I'm curious, I know you read something about this. Tell us a little bit more about what you saw and what you're thinking around this.
Yeah, it's just something I've been thinking about recently. You know, we talked with a lot of clients back in March. It seemed like we were getting a lot of people reaching out to us because deservingly so. It was like one of the fastest drops of all time. So statistics getting compared to the Great Depression, which I don't know if that's ever happened before. So it was warranted for the worry, the fear at that point in time. We didn't know where this thing was heading. A number of people, I'm sure, sold out of positions, whether it's clients that we work with. We certainly help clients shore up some of their cash positions, but maybe if you're not working with an advisor, we've heard a lot of clients of ours talk about like people they work with going to cash in their 401ks. And
right.
So one of the things we were talking about back in March, trying to help clients not sell out was, yeah, selling out is easy. You can make that decision. You say, this sucks. I don't want to think about this. I'm going to get out. You don't really think about the next decision point that you have to make. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're a few months in, like you said, to a pretty healthy recovery in the markets. So if you're sitting on a lot of cash or have cash coming to you, you're kind of like, you know, we've been talking about this in previous weekly shows, and we talk a lot more offline about this. Like, we don't know if the market's going to continue to rise. We don't know if it's going to go back to where it was in March. We just don't know. There's not a lot of strong conviction either way. We could see either possibility happening. We've talked about having to hold both possibilities, but let's say you're sitting on a lot of cash and you're losing out. You missed out on probably at this point 25-30% return from the bottom. You locked in the losses and now you've missed out on that bottom. You got to be pretty upset looking back, and you've got to be maybe wondering about what you can do to turn things around. And I think the first thing that we always go to is called dollar cost averaging for our clients, right? So figuring out a systematic way to get back into the markets. And that's, I think, more important when you don't have strong conviction over which way the market's going. So when we're working with clients who are regularly saving over a period of time, we always recommend dollar cost averaging, which is putting a set amount of money into your investments at a set point in time. So maybe it's every 2 weeks, maybe it's every month, but we work with them to do that. And we find, you know, the less that you have to think about it, the less that our brains and emotions can get in the way of us saving and investing. We typically get better results. So we would advise people to consider that, work with their advisor around coming up with a strategy to get back in the markets. And also, I think another important case or important point to think about is we always talk about you don't have to make it back the same way you lost it. So maybe you lost it in a strategy that you particularly didn't feel comfortable with. You're in something that was aggressive. You didn't like the returns and you didn't like seeing your account balances drop. Maybe you can look at investing in a different way, something that you're more comfortable with, that the next go around you're not going to feel as pressured to get out of. So those are my two thoughts. I'm wondering if you have anything else, Lisa.
Yeah, I think first to talk a little bit, Jared, about this sense of dollar cost averaging. I think the key elements are going to be systematic and automatic. So setting, you know, to your point, whether it's every 2 weeks, it's once a month, keeping to that date and having it automatic. So in fact, it's not this part of your brain that we need to worry about, it's the one back here we need to worry about. And right. And so just taking any guessing out of it and really ideally not paying attention. So not saying to yourself, oh, this is the day I'm going to invest. Oh, what happened with the market? Maybe I should pull the order. Just really committing to the strategy, the process, and also to think long term. If this is long-term money for you, this is not money you're going to be using anytime soon, don't worry about it. If this is retirement money, get it back invested and let it run. Get your long-term mindset back in place. The only money that I think people should be more concerned about is money you need in the next year, in which case you shouldn't be putting it back into the stock market most likely. If you know you need cash in the next 3 to 6, maybe 9 months, that should be more liquid. That shouldn't be in a long-term investment strategy that involves stocks anyway. So that's the thing is, if this is really long-term money, you want to get invested. We know that staying invested is how you make money. Most people do not make money selling and then selling at the high and buying at the low, because you can't, only in retrospect do you know where those 2 points are. And what I also know from experience is back on March 9th of 2009, I would say most people were not comfortable putting money into the market. And that's exactly when you have to put it back in if you're trying to really time the market. It's impossible. It doesn't feel good. So that's why you need to be systematic about it. I think the key, though, is really understanding what your investment, multiple accounts are for, and not committing money into the market that is really for short-term goals. Don't play with your short-term money to try to make up what you lost, right? In the next few months. Don't play that game, because especially in this volatile market, we're still sorting out all the economic issues. There's still some concerns about health issues, some spikes we're having, second wave, that whole kind of thing. And then literally we have the election coming later in the year. It's going to be a volatile year. This is a perfect time to be systematic and automatic, as opposed to try to guess, because even when we look at the futures the night before, that doesn't tell you what the market's going to do. And it's a hard time to try to time the market. Best to be systematic and automatic and be thoughtful about what the money is being committed for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up a good point. It kind of ties in with our previous topic, like checking the news too often. I think we see that with maybe some clients and some people we know who check their account balances and the performance in the market too often. And I just remember there's a good cartoon by Carl Richards, who is Behavior Gap. He sometimes has cartoons in the New York Times finance section or business section. And it's one where it's like checking your accounts daily and it's like dramatic spikes, and then checking it every year, it's like a smooth line. And that's really, I think, how we look at it. Like I was looking back, actually, this is a good point. I was looking back at a client's returns from 1 year. So the past 12 months, it's up 5% actually. From June last time to June last year to this year, it's up 5%,
Wow.
That was crazy to see. It's like, that does not feel like it's up 5%.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, hasn't it? And yeah, it really, and the other thing is, if you're getting overly attached, and you can start to feel yourself emotionally engaging with the ups and downs of your portfolio, that is honestly a red flag to stop looking so often. Because this is one of the things, we've talked about this before on other shows. This is something you can't control. You really, besides changing the asset allocation on your portfolio, keeping sufficient cash reserves, you can't control the markets. So getting emotionally engaged with where your portfolio is going is a recipe for, I think, struggling mental health.
Yeah, definitely. And that of course is what we want to avoid as best as possible right now.
Of course.
So I think the last topic, you wanted to tee this one up about the HELOCs.
Yeah, I was just reading an article today in the business section of the Wall Street Journal, just talking about, things are still in disarray with the economy. Some people think, okay, well, maybe I don't have a job right now, or maybe you've been lucky to be working from home and you've got a little more, because you're home, you've got a little more time on your hands. You're thinking, hey, let's get that patio together, or let's put that porch on, or whatever. And you think, hey, I'll tap the equity in my home, because I've got a lot of equity. A lot of Americans have a lot of equity in their homes, and interest rates are low. So why not reach out to the bank, and I'll get a home equity loan or a home equity line of credit, in particular, is what I'd like to focus on. And what we're finding is that a number of banks are actually shutting down the possibility, for a variety of reasons, to allow people to get a new home equity line of credit. In fact, one of the examples they gave was Navy Federal Credit Union, really strong, solid, big credit union. And because things got so crazy with interest rates going down and people wanting to refinance their first mortgages, what happened was they moved all of the people who were helping set up home equity lines of credit over to the first mortgage department. And so they couldn't even take on new clients for home equity lines of credit. On the other hand, there are banks that have decided to be a little more conservative. They got burned in 2008, 2009 with people who were leveraging the equity in their homes, and then buying other properties, or they would get over leveraged and, have spent the money on other things other than real estate, and then would end up defaulting because, they lost their job or the housing market fell apart. And so just because some of these institutions are a little gun shy, they're also shutting things down. What we saw back in 08, 09, and I don't know that we'll see as much of this, but what we did see then is that even clients who had home equity lines of credit, maybe you had a line and you hadn't drawn the whole line, but your bank comes back and actually lowers the amount you can borrow. So I don't think we're at that point right now. I also think it's important to remember that, you've got to have, yes, you've got equity in your house, but the bank wants to make sure that you can actually pay the interest. So
Right.
having some sort of income, having assets that produce income, you got to have something. If you're unemployed, that's going to be a bit of a tough sale for the bank to take you on, even if you're an existing customer. So while I know, rates are low and people are thinking, hey, well, maybe we should go out there and do something, be careful. And also, if you're, I'll say this, that if you're a first-time homeowner or home buyer, or maybe you're looking to buy a new home, don't assume that the banks are going to be as comfortable with you maybe taking on a second property or whatever. Do your homework up front. Don't start looking before you've been pre-qualified. And the two more points that I'd make, and I'll be curious to see what you think, Jared. One other point is that if you have taken forbearance on any loans, whether it's a business loan or it is your home mortgage or rent, maybe you've asked for forbearance. Forbearance being that you've asked to not pay for a period of time. That is going to be a red mark, a red flag, a black mark, and a red flag to the lenders as far as giving you credit. In fact, I was just talking with our business bank, and the first question they asked was, have you sought forbearance? Luckily, we hadn't, so not a big issue. But they're going to ask you that, and if you have, you may have to wait until next year once you're paying your mortgage or your rent or whatever it is again before you can get financing. Last thing I ran into, now this may be unique to the DC area, but worth understanding. I was talking with my mortgage broker to see whether it made sense to refinance. We've got a pretty good rate, but I thought, well, rates are pretty low. At least we thought, right? And it turns out that once your mortgage gets above about 510 and around the DC area or in New York or California, that's really easy to exceed. It's a little harder to get the best rates. And so that's something else to keep in mind, is that although we know there are low mortgage rates out there, that doesn't mean that you are going to be able to get them. It's going to depend on your mortgage balance. It's going to depend on your credit. It's going to depend on your income. All of those factors matter. So don't be surprised if it's not quite a slam dunk. And we use that rule of thumb, don't we? Maybe you can talk about the rule of thumb that we use to decide whether you should even refinance. Just tread carefully at this point.
Yeah, touched on a lot of great points there. The rule of thumb that we typically try to use with clients is that 1% rule when it comes to looking at your current mortgage versus what you might be able to refinance to. So there's a lot of ways you can check current mortgage rates. Some of that's dependent on like where your credit score is and your history and all that stuff. But if you have a current mortgage that is above 1% or at 1% that you could refinance down to, we recommend that's really the point where it makes sense, because you also have to factor in all the ancillary costs that go into repapering and refinancing the mortgage that you don't necessarily think about off the top. So for it to make financial sense, it's that 1% rule of thumb. And again, that's a rule of thumb. It's not the answer for every situation, but that's kind of like where we start. You also talked about getting pre-qualified, which I thought was a good point. I work with some of the younger clients and first-time home buyers with the firm, and that's like the first step we say to everyone, because not only does it tell you how much it tells you you're fit to borrow from the lender, but it also gives you like that high range of what's the max amount you can tap into to borrow. So that kind of helps you narrow down what your price range is. I think you don't want to be borrowing above that point most times. So I think it's a really good opportunity to do that. So I'm curious, if people are having trouble accessing the equity in their house and they need to tap into some quick cash right now, is there anything, I mean, there's always credit cards, and as financial planners, we don't really like to go there first. Is there any other option, I guess, out there for people?
A couple of different things. Certainly, if you have a credit union relationship, often, now they're not large, but you can get small personal lines of credit that they'll just give you as a customer. They're going to do a credit check and, they're going to check you out. I mean, it's not like they're just going to give you money for free. That's often a place you can go, not so much with banks, but you see that more with credit unions. Yeah, obviously credit cards are a possibility for some of our clients so that we didn't have to sell off of their portfolios during the volatility. We did securities-backed lines of credit. At a brokerage firm, you might call that a margin loan, but margin interest rates have been higher that we've seen. I think, Jared, it also goes back to, and we also know that if you're having difficulties financially, you've been negatively impacted by COVID-19, maybe furloughed, lost your job, your income's been decreased. We know because of the CARES Act that you can access your retirement plan accounts as well, either via a loan or a withdrawal. That's definitely something you need to talk with your tax advisor and a financial planner or financial advisor about. So those are, I think, are all ways to get at cash. I think it's important to ideally plan ahead and try to have the cash resources. We realize you can't always do that. The other piece is to be careful about thinking of your house as a go-to source of equity or cash. We have a number of clients who tend to plan for the idea that, when my child goes to college, I'll sell a property, or when I retire, I'll sell a property. Well, what happens if your retirement or your college, your child going to college happens right now, and the market may be tighter, and depending on where you live, where you are in the country, you may have to sell it at a lower price. And although people will always tell us, clients will always tell us, oh, that's fine. If I have to sell it, I'll sell it. When they actually get to the point of having to sell it, nobody likes to sell it less than they think it's worth, right, Jared? We've run into that before.
Yeah.
So I think you want to be really careful about using your house equity as part of the funding for your goals. And you need to have a plan B, because there are times where it just doesn't make sense. You would walk away with a lot less money, or you might have been thinking you would do a home equity line of credit, but now you're out of work temporarily and you can't. So it's equity, building home equity is a great phenomena that Americans like to attach to. And yet it's one that you need to be very careful about and understand the pros and cons of it.
So headline there, Lisa is bearish on owning a home. No, just kidding.
Well, we talked about that right on the other show.
Yeah.
That's like an American thing that, you own property, whereas there's plenty of other places in the world where people are not as focused on home ownership. And I think as long as you think about it like any other investment and understand the pros and cons, like investing in stocks, yes, you can make a lot of money. You can also lose money. They're volatile. Home ownership, although it seems like a slam dunk, when it comes time to access those returns or that equity, you need to understand what's possible and what's not. And like I said, have a plan B.
Yeah, housing is definitely viewed as a less liquid asset than some other assets out there. So it's always important, We're not saying don't go out and buy homes, but, think about some of the pros and cons and need to access those funds. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up. We definitely appreciate everyone tuning in. Hopefully you're enjoying these weekly videos. Go ahead and give us a like if you are.
And subscribe.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel. That also helps us. Yeah. So do both of those. subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, just help all the algorithms.
Well, and share with your friends,
And
family.
share with your friends. Yeah.
We appreciate that, and we welcome any questions or topics that you'd like us to tackle. We're always looking for new ideas, so please email Jared or I, or you can even, if you're not already part of the Omega family, go ahead and just reach out to our website, and you can contact us through there.
Yes. Great. All right. We hope everybody has a good rest of their day, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week.
All right, take care.
Bye.